The family dinner devolved into an outright shouting match when the mother-in-law produced a stack of bills and declared, "Son, here are the statements for the utilities. They've accumulated to $70,000 over the past 6 months." Her gaze was accusatory, fixed on her daughter-in-law. The son immediately sided with his mother, grabbing his wife by the neck and bellowing, "Are you completely out of your mind? Why aren't you paying for my mother? Get the money." But the wife remained unfazed. Hello, dear listeners. It's a pleasure to welcome you to my channel. I have a new captivating story for you. I hope you enjoy it. Marina fumbled for her keys in her purse, pausing at the doorway. A loud voice emanated from within, her mother-in-law's. Tamara Vladimirovna was explaining something to her son in that tone one reserves for individuals who are particularly slow to grasp concepts. Marina sighed and pushed the door open. 3 years ago, when she and Dennis had first tied the knot, she had still harbored the hope that things would improve, that her mother-in-law would eventually adjust, and their relationship would warm. Little did she know, Tamara Vladimirovna resided in her own 2-room apartment across town, yet she made visits to their home 3 times a week, always unannounced, always with her own set of keys, which Dennis had personally given her. "In the first month of marriage, my mother must have access, just in case something happens," he had explained. Marina had remained silent then. In fact, she had been quiet a great deal during that first year. Her mother-in-law was seated at the kitchen table, various papers spread before her. Dennis stood nearby, his brow furrowed, tapping away on his phone, seemingly calculating something. Marina walked past, kicking off her heels, but Tamara Vladimirovna called out to her in a commanding voice, "Marina, come here. We need to talk." It was always the same. "We need to talk" was code for her mother-in-law demanding something, with Dennis passively agreeing. Marina returned to the kitchen, leaning against the doorframe. "Sit down," her mother-in-law gestured to a chair. "I'll stand." Tamara Vladimirovna pursed her lips. She had always disliked it when Marina displayed even a hint of independence. "As you wish. I wanted to discuss a financial matter." A financial matter, as if they were discussing some corporate contract, not their household budget. Marina worked as an accountant at a small firm, earning $48,000. Dennis, a delivery driver, made slightly more than $50,000. They rented a 1-bedroom apartment for $25,000. Approximately $12,000 went towards utilities, leaving the rest for food, clothing, and transportation. They lived frugally but without debt. Tamara Vladimirovna, on the other hand, received a pension of about $25,000. She also worked part-time at the library in addition to renting out her garage for $7,000. Not a bad income for a single woman. However, her mother-in-law possessed a unique talent for perpetually needing something. One moment, it was a shortage of medication, the next a broken refrigerator, or the desire for a new fur coat. "I was just calculating," Tamara Vladimirovna began, tapping her pen against the papers. "You rent an apartment for $25,000. That's not economical. You're living within someone else's walls, throwing money away." "And what do you propose?" Marina inquired. "I propose we move in together. I have 2 rooms. That will be enough for you. You'll pay me $20,000. That's less than you pay now. Plus, you'll save on utilities, and I'll receive some assistance." Dennis remained silent, his gaze fixed on his phone. Marina looked at him, not expecting him to utter a single word. He simply shrugged. "Dennis, are you serious?" Marina couldn't help herself. "Mom will think about it," he mumbled. "What's there to think about?" the mother-in-law huffed. "I'm family. A family should stick together." Marina turned and walked out of the kitchen. She wasn't going to argue at that moment. Over the past 3 years, she had learned one simple truth. Tamara Vladimirovna never relented until she achieved her goals, and Dennis always assisted her in this. For 2 weeks, her mother-in-law exerted pressure, calling 10 times a day, arriving with new calculations, lamenting her health and hinting that she would soon be all alone. Dennis listened, nodded, and then, in the evenings, tried to persuade Marina. "What's the harm? She's my mother. It's difficult for her being alone." "Difficult? She has a pension, a part-time job, and rents out a garage. Dennis, she just wants to control us." "Don't be ridiculous. It will simply be an economy." "There will be no economy. She'll find something to spend it on anyway." But Marina understood she had already lost before she had even agreed, because Dennis lived by one ironclad rule: Mom is always right. No matter how much Marina argued or presented her case, he always sided with Tamara Vladimirovna. A month later, they packed their belongings and moved. Initially, it was bearable. Tamara Vladimirovna even made an effort to maintain a distance, refraining from prying questions. Marina and Dennis occupied the larger room. Her mother-in-law kept to her own space. It seemed as though each had their own interests. But within a week, the petty annoyances began. Tamara Vladimirovna would enter their room without knocking, inspecting whether they had dusted or made their beds. She would offer critiques on Marina's cooking, her attire, her way of speaking. "Dennis, tell her that soup should be made with meat broth, not these cubes," the mother-in-law would exclaim. "You're a man. You need proper nutrition." Dennis remained silent. Marina grew angry but also remained quiet. She worked until 6, returning home exhausted, only to be met with nitpicking and lectures. Her mother-in-law, meanwhile, was home almost constantly. Her part-time library position seemed more like a formality. About 2 months later, Tamara Vladimirovna announced that the utility costs had increased. Now, instead of $20,000, they had to pay $25,000. Marina was outraged. "We agreed on 20. We agreed when the rates were different. Everything has gone up. Do you think I should pay the difference out of my own pocket?" Dennis immediately agreed. Marina gritted her teeth and paid. But something inside her snapped. She realized she had walked into a trap with no apparent escape. Moving back out wasn't an option. Dennis would never agree. He now spent every evening in the kitchen with his mother, discussing news, laughing at her jokes. Marina remained alone in their room. One evening, Tamara Vladimirovna declared that a new television was necessary. The old one, she claimed, was malfunctioning terribly and wouldn't pick up channels. "I've found one for $42,000. We'll split the cost equally." "Equally?" Marina repeated, "meaning Dennis and I pay $21,000. And what's the issue? You'll be watching it too." "We don't watch television." "So what? It's a communal item. It's in the apartment." Dennis supported his mother. Marina paid again. The television they bought was enormous and was hung in the living room. Marina never went in there. Then other expenses began to pile up. Sometimes her mother-in-law needed to visit her dacha, other times to escort a friend to the hospital, or for some other necessity. Each time, Tamara Vladimirovna would approach her son, who in turn would approach Marina. "You got paid yesterday. Give Mom a couple of thousand." Marina gave the money because refusing meant a full-blown argument, enduring reproaches, and witnessing Dennis's accusatory glare. 6 months later, Marina calculated her expenses. It turned out that over that period, she had spent more than $100,000 on her mother-in-law alone, $25,000 for rent each month, plus the television, plus constant loans that were never repaid. Marina lost weight, grew gaunt, and lay awake at night, replaying the same thoughts. How had she descended to this life? Dennis remained oblivious. He was content. His mother was nearby, his wife was obedient, and all was peaceful. Occasionally, he would try to embrace Marina, but she would pull away. Intimacy under these circumstances felt like mockery. Then, her mother-in-law's health issues began. Tamara Vladimirovna constantly complained of high blood pressure, heart problems, and joint pain. Doctors found nothing serious, but she stocked up on medications in large quantities. Dennis dutifully brought home money for the pills. Marina no longer argued. She simply waited for something. She knew not what. And then, one day, she returned home from work to find Dennis and Tamara Vladimirovna sitting together. both with faces as if something terrible had occurred. Her mother-in-law waited until Marina had taken off her shoes, then commanded, "Marina, come here immediately." Marina walked into the kitchen. Tamara Vladimirovna was seated at the table, a stack of bills before her. Dennis stood beside her, looking as dark as a storm cloud. "Look at this, 70,000 for utilities accumulated over the past 6 months." The mother-in-law pointed a finger at the bills. Marina silently gazed at the papers. 70,000 over 6 months, meaning approximately 11 to 12,000 per month. She slowly raised her eyes to her mother-in-law. And what? Tamara Vladimirovna bristled. "We agreed that you would pay the utilities. I gave you the apartment and you pay for electricity, water, and gas." Marina frowned. "We agreed to pay you 25,000 per month. That included rent and utilities." "Nothing of the sort," the mother-in-law retorted. 25 is for the apartment, and utilities are separate. Did you think I would pay for you myself?" Marina felt a surge of heat rise within her. She remembered the conversation perfectly. Tamara Vladimirovna had promised that 20, then 25 was all-inclusive, but arguing now was futile. Her mother-in-law would twist her words, and Dennis would believe her. Dennis stepped forward, his face flushed, a vein pulsing on his forehead. He grabbed Marina by the shoulder, not painfully but sharply, and roared, "Are you completely out of your mind? Why aren't you paying for my mother? Get the money!" Marina froze. He had never laid a hand on her. He had yelled, accused her, yes, but it had never come to this. She looked into his eyes and suddenly understood that this was the end of everything, their marriage, her patience, her hope. She slowly disengaged her shoulder, looked at her mother-in-law, then at her husband, and calmly, very calmly said, "All right, I'll bring the money right now." Dennis recoiled. Her mother-in-law nodded with satisfaction. Marina walked into her room, retrieved a folder of documents from the closet, returned to the kitchen, and placed a printout on the table. "Here is a statement from my bank. Each month, I transferred 25,000 to your account. Tamara Vladimirovna, for 6 consecutive months, that's 150,000. Here are the dates. Here's the account number." Her mother-in-law turned pale. Dennis snatched the paper, staring at the figures. But that's for the rent," Tamara Vladimirovna stammered. "That's for everything. You yourself said the utilities were included. I even saved a voice message. Would you like to hear it?" Marina took out her phone and played the recording. The mother-in-law's voice was clear, without interference. 25,000 a month, and you don't worry about a thing. Everything's included, the apartment and the utilities." Silence descended. Tamara Vladimirovna opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water. Dennis looked from his mother to his wife. "Mom, you said—" "I don't remember," the mother-in-law squeaked. "She made it all up, forged it." Marina let out a laugh. It was a clear, almost hysterical sound. "Forged a voice message. Seriously? Are you going to tell me I'm a hacker next?" Tamara Vladimirovna jumped up, grabbed the bills. "There's still a debt. Someone has to pay." "You," Marina replied calmly, "because these bills are in your name. This is your apartment, your utilities. Dennis and I aren't even registered here. I checked." The mother-in-law slumped into a chair. Dennis stood frozen, unable to utter a word. Marina put the documents back into the folder. Her hands did not tremble. A strange sense of calm washed over her, the kind that comes when a decision has finally been made. "I'm moving out tomorrow," she announced. "I'll take my belongings. Dennis, you can stay here with Mom. It suits you better." "Marina, wait," Dennis began, but she raised her hand. "No, it's over. I'm finished." She walked into the room, closed the door, sat on the bed, and for the first time in a long time, allowed herself to relax. Voices drifted from beyond the wall. Her mother-in-law was lamenting something, and Dennis was trying to placate her. But Marina no longer listened. The next day, she indeed packed her belongings. Dennis attempted to stop her, pleading and promising to rectify everything. Marina silently placed her clothes into her bag. Tamara Vladimirovna demonstratively locked herself in her room. "You'll regret this," Dennis declared as a parting shot. "You won't survive on your own." Marina turned. "You know what's funny? I've been on my own for the last 6 months anyway." She rented a small studio apartment for $18,000. It was cramped, but it was her own space. No one entered without knocking, and no one scrutinized her every move. For the first week, she simply came home from work and sat in silence. It was pure bliss. Dennis Tommen. Dennis called for a couple more weeks. Initially, he asked her to return, then accused her of selfishness, and then asked again. Marina blocked his number and filed for divorce. The proceedings were swift. They had no shared assets nor children. 3 months later, she encountered Dennis by chance at the supermarket. He had lost weight, looked haggard, and stood at the checkout with a basket full of junk: chips, crackers, beer. He saw Marina and looked flustered. "Hi?" "Hi." An awkward pause. "How are you?" he asked. "Fine. Listen, I'm sorry about that evening. I shouldn't have—" "Forget it," Marina cut him off. "It doesn't matter anymore." He nodded, wanting to add something, but she walked past. The checkout line was already forming, and that evening, Marina received a message from Dennis's former colleague. They occasionally kept in touch, and she was aware of the divorce. "Listen, are you aware that Dennis was fired? The boss got fed up. He was rude and left. Now he's jobless. And his mom, they say, moved in with a friend's son. She couldn't afford the utilities. She's rented out the apartment to some students. Dennis is now crashing at friends' places." Marina read the message and smirked. She felt no malice, only a gentle sadness. Things could have been different if Dennis had ever stood by her side, if Tamara Vladimirovna hadn't been so greedy and calculating, but what was done was done. A year passed. Marina completed some courses and transferred to another company with a salary of $65,000. She rented a larger apartment, a 1-bedroom in a new building. She adopted a cat. On weekends, she met with friends, went to the cinema, and read books. One day, Dennis contacted her again, a long message filled with remorse and pleas for forgiveness. He had found work as a security guard and was renting a room. His mother no longer bothered him. She was too preoccupied with herself. He realized how wrong he had been. Perhaps they could try again? Marina read the message and pondered, recalling how he had grabbed her shoulder, how he had roared, demanding money, how he had never defended her, how he had chosen his mother again and again, until Marina finally broke. She deleted the message without replying, closed her phone, and poured herself some tea. The cat jumped onto her lap and began to purr. Outside, snow was falling, soft and unhurried. Marina picked up a book from the table, one she had long intended to finish, and settled in comfortably. The apartment was warm and quiet. No intrusive voices, no accusations, no expectations. Just her, the cat, and the peaceful rustle of pages.